Good morning, everybody. It's 10:38. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christie's and Mercy Muroki on GB News, live as ever on your TV, online and radio this morning.
Yes, now to our next story. The head of the National Union of Students has accused the government of, quote, jumping on a bandwagon after ministers suspended engagement with them. This was due to allegations of systemic anti-Semitism within the organisation. And anti-Semitism on campus isn't just limited to the students.
Yeah, well, SOAS, that's the School of Oriental and African Studies, was forced to repay £15,000 in fees to a Jewish student because he experienced a, quote, toxic anti-Semitic environment. Now, a professor at the University of Bristol labelled the Jewish society there as pawns of the state of Israel, for example. The days go by, but it seems to be the same old story when it comes to anti-Semitism. So why has nothing changed? Well, we're delighted now to be joined by Nina Freedman, President of the Union of Jewish Students. Thank you very much for coming into the studio as well, Nina. Look, I'm not Jewish, right? How bad is anti-Semitism really? Do you feel uncomfortable daily?
I don't feel uncomfortable daily. I think it's definitely been over-dramatised in some areas of the press. Anti-Semitism is definitely a problem on campus, don't get me wrong, and Jewish students are afraid to be their full selves in some places, but generally Jewish life on campus is thriving. We have around 9,000 Jewish students on campus and they are living a great Jewish life.
Explain to us how, when it does manifest, anti-Semitism does manifest on campus, because with things like anti-black racism, for example, often it's about microaggressions or it's about, certain words that you shouldn't say to people and things like that. With anti-Semitism, it's a bit more complicated because it's tied up with lots of politics and Middle Eastern politics, isn't it?
Yeah, well, anti-Semitism manifests in a variety of ways. It's kind of tied up with ancient tropes of Jews having power, undue influence over the world, and we just see these being reappropriated for modern times. So whether that's Jews in the UK being in charge of the State of Israel, which is obviously untrue, or Jewish students, like we said before, like Professor Miller said, Jewish students having undue influence, the same tropes are just being repurposed for modern times.
But do you feel backed up? Because I've spoken quite a lot, in fact, we've spoken quite a lot, really, on this show, about some really shocking instances that have taken place very recently. There was the St John's Wood incident, which I'm sure you're aware of, obviously, where, in case you're not at home or you're listening on your radio in your car or whatever, basically a group of thugs, really, drove through St John's Wood, a relatively Jewish area, and shouting things like they were going to rape their mothers and this and that. It was just horrible stuff, just horrible, disgusting anti-Semitism. We've also seen images of police officers walking next to groups of people protesting in London. They were shouting, like, we want Jewish blood. The police officers did nothing. There was that bus full of Jewish children on Oxford Street. Look, we could go on, is my point here. So do you feel protected? Because from where I'm sitting, it doesn't look like the police get involved that much.
The police definitely do get involved, and they're aided a lot by the CST, the Community Security Trust, which is a Jewish communal organisation that works to protect the Jewish community. So there is that level of support, but I think there's still a general misconception and misunderstanding of what anti-Semitism is and how to tackle it, and that's something we definitely see transferred onto campus.
And do you think, obviously, when Jeremy Corbyn was leader of the Labour Party, we saw a spike in anti-Semitism incidents and a culture, perhaps, of not taking it seriously enough. Do you feel that since Keir Starmer has become leader, things have improved?
I definitely think things have improved after the EHRC investigation. Definitely the Labour Party is making some changes. They're removing people from the party that have been accused of anti-Semitic behaviour in the past. And I think we're definitely moving towards a place where Jewish people can feel safe and welcome in the Labour Party again. So we're definitely heading in the right direction, but there's still more work to be done.
OK, now, one thing that's always fascinating me, so I am from near Manchester originally, so North Manchester's got a very high Jewish population, of course, so by definition I went to school with, I think my school was probably about 30% Jewish, I think, and then I moved to North London, right, so, which has got another huge Jewish population there as well. But one thing that always shocked me is outside your synagogues, and from what I can tell, your schools and almost any gathering, there's always a security presence. Now, I didn't have that. I've never had that at my church, for example. And that implies something, doesn't it? There clearly is a sense of threat.
Definitely there's a sense of threat. I grew up going to my local synagogue and I went to a Jewish school, and every morning you say hello to the security guards and you know they're there for your protection. And there's definitely an ominous feeling that there's clearly someone out there to get us. And from the very youngest ages, you are taught that Jewish people need to be protected, which is something that's ingrained kind of in all British Jews.
And does a lot of that, can I ask, does a lot of that stem from, obviously, what happened during the Second World War? Was that a big grounding factor that you can't ever forget that? And then on top of that, you've got things that are going on, obviously, in Palestine as well. Is there a real sense of Jews, for Jews, of being constantly under threat, of some existential threat, shall I say?
I wouldn't say there's an existential threat to Jewish life in Britain. I personally feel very safe as a Jewish person in Britain, but there's a lot of intergenerational trauma that comes with something like the Holocaust, and Jewish people are kind of always worried. We've been kicked out of many countries over the years, and who knows when it will happen next. So I do feel like we're always remaining vigilant, just in case, which is sad.
And very finally, we started off this segment by saying about the National Union of Students. Now, they've had a fair share of anti-Semitic allegations levelled against them. What's your take on the National Union of Students?
So I think, unfortunately, over the years, it's become a place where Jewish students don't feel welcome. Jewish students used to heavily engage with NUS, and over the years, this engagement has decreased. We only had 2 Jewish delegates at NUS conference this year, which is a real shame. And I think the investigation that they've just announced is a step in the right direction to take anti-Semitism seriously, but they need to rebuild a lot of trust with Jewish students.
Look, Nina Freedman, thank you very, very much. Great stuff. You'll have to come back on there. It was, of course, Nina Freedman, President of the Union of Jewish Students. Right, so...